everybody. How you doing today, YouTube? So today we're working on a 2017 Toyota Camry. Customer complains that there's a lot of brake noise coming from the front end. Took it for a short drive and there's a lot of brake noise. So we're gonna tear it apart and see what we can find. Alright, so first thing I'm seeing is all this rust color stuff? That usually happens when the brake pads are so wore out they start grinding the rotor and it tosses the metal out here onto the wheel, and then some water gets on it, you know, it rusts like that. So that's a clear indication that this is where the majority of the noise is coming from. This one does not have that. Neither does this one. Or this one. So we're definitely gonna tear apart that wheel first. First things first, go ahead and jack it up. You got a couple options. You can go into this little drip rail right here, which is like a jacking point, but that's more used for your factory scissor jack. So I don't necessarily like putting a big car jack on it because sometimes they crumple and crack, but sometimes it's your only choice. But in this case, I went to basically a frame on this car, and that's the best bet in my opinion. Okay, so first thing I'm noticing, this might be a fairly new rotor. I could be wrong, it could be a factory one. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to make that assumption. But I would assume that the brakes were done at least at some point, because I think this has like 80 or 90,000 miles. I'm not positive on when these brake pads are, you know, rated to go out. I want to say usually it's like 40 or 60,000 miles. I could be wrong. I don't know. But anyway, this rotor is definitely not feeling good. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop everything off, take a look at it. This pad looks like it might have some life left in it, so we might have a season up caliper here. I'm not positive. I'm not, you know, again, I'm not positive. We'll figure that out in a minute. Alright, so first things first, we're gonna go ahead and pop the caliper off, which is gonna be this bolt and this bolt. So in this case here is a 14 millimeter. The first thing I'm noticing is that the slider is actually spinning with it. So I'm going to go get a wrench for that. That looks to be about a 16, maybe a 15. Be right back. Turns out it's not a 15 or a 16. It's one of them, they're adjustable vice grips. Yeah, I went through every wrench in my garage and none of them would fit, so it's vice grips. If you put the vice grips on nice and tight in the right way, you won't have any, you might have a little bit of scoring, but it ain't gonna hurt the bolt. It will be just fine. So yeah, no big deal. Yeah. Yeah. Well. Gotta bust out the big guns for this one. So that's what it should look like, and that's what that one does look like. That's not good. Should not look like that. So rotor's definitely chewed up, but it's fairly thick. It's not cracked or nothing, so we might not replace the rotors depending on the customer's budget. But I'm gonna check and see if it's slide pins are a little sticky. They're moving pretty good, so I'm gonna go ahead and push the caliper and see how that goes. Sometimes what happens, somebody will change out the pads, and the pads will be kind of sticky right inside of these little slider tabs. I've had to grind them down several times. These little tabs will be a little sticky. They're like perfectly on size, and then they get sent off when they're getting made. They get sent off and they'll get coated, painted, whatever, and that paint will make it stick inside of here. So I'm gonna see if that was the issue. Maybe it wasn't the caliper, maybe it is the caliper. I don't know. I'll let you guys know. I'll show you. Alright, so I'm gonna take the old brake pad, stuff her down in there, and then take the old trusty C-clamp and give her one of those compressions. Always put a brake pad here, or at least some type of buffer, because I've literally punched a hole in the bottom of these pistons from the C-clamp. So when you're compressing these pistons, they should go in, I would say, somewhat easy. Like, they definitely need a little bit of tension on it. But if you're cranking, really cranking on it, then chances are the caliper's sticking. In this case, I don't think the caliper's bad because it's going in fairly easy. So my money is going towards the pad was sticking, and that's what caused all of this. Alright, so the rotor is a little chewed up, but I'm not going to change the rotors. One, personally, I don't think it's all that necessary. Two, the customer is on a budget. The surface is beat up, but what'll happen is that new pad will just basically wear into the rotor, and it might lose fractions of an inch, thousandths, 10 thousandths off of the pad by the time this rotor is wore and looks presentable, I guess. It'll get shiny again, kind of like this side. So I'm not going to be crazy over anal and change it. I don't think it's necessary. I'm sure somebody will argue with me, but I've done tons and tons and tons of brake jobs. Never had an issue. Granted, if it was way thinner, or if I could see a very noticeable difference between the thickness of this side and this side, where there was just massive grooves and steps, yeah, I would change it. But it's not in that bad a shape. It'll be fine. So I'm gonna run up and grab a set of pads so we can slap this back together, and yeah, knock this one out today. All right, so I'm gonna pop off these little guys. Alright, so this little guy, little tab, falls on the inside, this one falls on the outside. They are a little different, so you gotta pay attention to that. There's gonna be 2 different hands of them. So this little springy part goes to the outside. Okay, so the front pad fit just fine. I finally got the rear pad in. This little guide right here is kind of what's giving me all my issue. I was struggling trying to get it to go in, and then once I did get it in, it was real tight. So I'm going to knock down just a little bit of this material, kind of like I was talking earlier. Sometimes that paint builds up that surface and makes it a little harder to work with. And then it doesn't let it slide, and then you end up with issues like what the customer previously had. And I don't like when that happens. So I just shined up this little tab, that's it. Just knocked the paint off. And now it fits right in there. It moves. Yeah, it was way too stiff before, and that's what the issue was. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these back off. I'm gonna grease them up, put this side back together. Well, I still gotta grease these, but we'll do that in a minute. As for grease, you don't need a crazy amount. Some people lather them up and do all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't. I'm not some people. Some people really, they coat this surface and they say it helps with some noise. I don't see the difference, so I'm not gonna do it. Just makes for a big old mess when you're trying to put the car back together. Pop the little squeaker on real quick. This little squeaker's causing me a ton of issue. There she goes. Still moves pretty good, so I'm not too concerned with it. I'm gonna go ahead and pop these out real quick. Be careful not to rip the boots. I'm gonna use a pick and get right up underneath it. Do that on both. They're actually in really nice shape. I'm just going to grease them up, put them back in. A lot of times I'll just push it in and you'll see the rubber grease pop, or not the rubber grease, but the rubber grommet just pop right back over that little lip. Same thing here. And pop. Perfect. Go ahead and put the caliper back on. Make sure that when you're putting the caliper on, you don't have this line all tangled up. Gotta use our trusty vice grip A one more time. Alrighty, and this side's done. I'm gonna go ahead and put the wheel back on and go knock out the other side and take it for a test drive.